So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to switch to a demonstration of the tools, and I'm just going to show you how quickly you can start to put together a framework for your application and then begin to start using that as a basis for enriching and improving the application. Okay. So this is XMP Director. It's just highlighted on the screen at the moment. And what we do is we go in and we create a new project. This is within the Eclipse framework. So this is a programming framework that will be very familiar to any developers, Java developers and web developers. What it offers is a set of tools for creating your service. You can see there's a palette in the middle of the screen. This is where we lay out the fundamental call flow of the application. And on the right-hand side there is a palette where we select the components we want to use. We're just putting now in a menu block, which is a sophisticated block that probably underneath has hundreds and hundreds of lines of VoiceXML code, but for us it's just a simple block on this diagram that we can manipulate quite easily. We then add in a couple of other diagrams. These diagram blocks allow us to encapsulate more complex code underneath them, more complex logic and call flow underneath them. So by putting these in at the top level, we can actually build quite a quick view of what we want this application to do. And we can see that really we're going to come into this, we've got a menu choice, the caller's going to make a menu choice, and they've got the option of getting a balance from their account, getting some history information from their account, or possibly transferring to an agent. We very simply join up these blocks. It's just a case of picking up the lines, as you can see, and dragging and dropping them into the right place. So I'm just going to carry on joining those. Also, just a quick look there at the form block, just to show you a load of the events and conditions that block has to handle. Again, the tool provides that capability for us. So we're going to add some menu choices now. So first of all, the caller can choose a balance. We'll allow them to press the 1 key, and we're also going to allow them to say the word balance. Again, it's a simple service, so we're just using a simple grammar to begin with, just a single utterance from the caller, but the tool supports full complexity of grammars and any choice of phrase or combination of phrases. Finally, we've got a 0 to agent option, or the caller can say help. And you can see that what that's done for us is configure the appropriate links on the pane for the application. And again, we can just join those links up to the right location. So now the caller has 3 choices at this menu. They can ask for balance, they can ask for history, or they can ask for help, and that will transfer them to an agent. So the next thing we'll do is we'll add the links out of these pages. So first of all, each of these items of call flow are going to enter and then exit and come out and say OK. I'm actually on one of these, on the history, I'm going to create a bypass, and that means that when we create this application, that piece of code will actually be ignored in the first instance, and that allows us to test the application very quickly. It also saves me having to create that logic, that call flow logic at this stage. I can come back and do that later. So now our entire call flow is joined up, as you can see, and that makes perfect sense, really. Everything ends in a disconnect where the IVR finally hangs up. We're then going to go in and configure some functionality. First of all, let's handle the agent transfer. So again, we can just reorganize the screen to suit our working method, and we're going to introduce a transfer element into here. Again, transfer is a standard component within VoiceXML specification, and that allows us to take a call from the IVR and pass it to another destination. We'll just connect that up, and then we configure the options. And the tool will give us all the options that are available to us. We're just going to use a dummy address at the moment for the agent that we're going to transfer this to, and we're going to make a SIP transfer to an agent, so we can just put the details in the box there. We're going to allow bridging, which means that the application can monitor what's going to happen on this transfer for us. In particular, we're going to allow a maximum of 10 seconds for that to happen. And then we're quickly going to go in and put in some details for the prompt. Now, I'm not going to go into the full prompting here because I'm going to show you that later, how we work that. And I'm going to make this prompt dynamic. And by making it dynamic, that means we can change it at a later date via the console, and we'll show you that later. So if we now go into our next block to configure, and we're going to get the user's balance. Obviously, to get a balance, we're going to have to look up some kind of database. XMP makes it very, very easy to look up databases. I think this is one of my favorite features of the tool because it's so easy to do. I'll show you that in a second. And then when we've looked up the database, we're either going to play the balance back to the caller. So I'll just put a block in there now to play the balance. Or alternatively, we're going to play an error message if for some reason the database isn't there, or perhaps their balance is negative and has to be dealt with in another way. So again, just place those and very quickly join up those blocks to make sure that the call flow is complete from start to end. Okay, so now we've done that, let's go in and configure the database query. Now the great thing in here is there's no code to write. All we need to do is specify the database and the select clause using SQL that we're going to use, and all the other code that's needed to handle looking up that database, handling errors, and joining strings together, and all those things that programmers normally have to do, that's all handled. The tool also allows us to insert some variables, and what we're doing here is we're using the caller's CLI as a way of looking up the database. So we're imagining that maybe they are going to be calling from a mobile phone, and we can look up their account number. We need somewhere to store the result, so we're going to read the current balance from the database and store it in a variable. And that's it. That's everything we need to do that database lookup. All we're going to do now is also handle the condition if there are no rows returned from the database, and we'll play an error. So you can see quite quickly we were able to do that. And let's just quickly put in some prompt information. Again, I'm not really going to specify the prompts here, that's going to be for the VUI designer, but what I am going to do is put in a small amount of prompt text in a text-to-speech box, and that's going to allow me to test the service as a developer. The VUI designer can come along at a later date and override all this information and put the final prompts in for the service without actually having to come back and visit the code or visit the call flow. And last but not least, we are going to just put a short description in for the error message. And that's it. That's actually created an application that at this stage we could more or less use to generate and use as a proof of concept. We'll be able to call that application and test it out. So what I'm now going to do is show you what happens when we apply the prompts to that service.